What's up, everybody? This is Karak with ACG, and as always, it's my continuing mission to bring you reviews that aren't 2 minutes long or filled with sponsored bullcrap. Today, I'm taking a look at the Children of Zodiarc, and while it's not a game based on the life and times behind the Zodiac killer's now adult-age children, which would have been awesome, it is a bit like Final Fantasy Tactics got into bed with Dragon Dice, and then Magic the Gathering stopped by at the perfect time to deliver some pizza. Wink, wink. Children of Zodiarc is out on July 19th for $19.99. Let's see how it did, shall we? As always, if you like the video, maybe subscribe. So here's my review for Children of Zodiarc. Worlds where you don't know what you can do from minute to minute to minute, craps fantasy style, and obnoxious teammates. Graphics start first. You know, I actually sort of like this. It's not amazingly detailed, but zooming down into the confines of a street alley as your heroes do battle mano-a-mano with what looks like lepers who've been handed steak knives before being told to go out and just stab anyone nearby, it doesn't actually look half bad, and you can see little bits of detail like the cobblestone work on the side of a building or the fattened victuals laying across the world's largest Thanksgiving spread. And no lie, that turkey might actually just be a dude. That thing is huge. But Andre the Giant-sized turkeys aside, I actually really did like the overall look of the title. Now, when it comes down to it and you start attacking everyone, they have little separate attack animations for the various cards that they can use, and it all has a very solidified feel to it. It also runs incredibly well, but I think, let's be honest, no one really expected this to be Crisis 5, now with more Yu-Gi-Oh cards, so in the end, it runs about what you would expect. Now, for the most part, it's a nice, tight presentation that mixes gameplay with an almost oil-based presentation when in the cutscenes. But unfortunately, along the way, apparently, Children drew a couple bad cards for its hand because it does run into some problems. First, battlefields that you play on are woefully small. I mean ridiculously small, meaning many times the moment an enemy, whether from the start or teleported in with a small text excerpt explaining, while no one's surprised that 3 heavily armed men just Kirk, Spock, and McCoy'd their way into the battle, you can be attacked almost directly without even moving. It doesn't happen many times, but it does happen a couple times. And while I like the lack of a safe zone and the idea overall, it just feels tiny and scrunched at any time regardless, especially for how little they have going on here, because the game really doesn't have any real movement to it, but the characters themselves. And at times that can leave you with a feeling like your entire day's been spent in a back plot of someone's communal garden, beating the shit out of little kids. Secondly, this has to be the worst camera interaction ever. No transparencies results in you twisting and turning like you're trying to get a pic of a friggin' birthing canal just so you can see who is able to do what in an area. Overall though, I'd say I like the game's look, and while some of the enemies appear a bit samey, this is a card/dice battling title with a body count like a cult Kool-Aid drink-off, so it's not that surprising if it looks like your family reunion, and some folks look a little bit like everybody else. As a package, I'd say pretty good with a couple issues here and there. Sound, music, and voice. And of course, when it comes to audio categories, sound is up first. Now, for what it's doing, it's not so bad, but I have to say that I am surprised at the lack of almost any kind of true processing effects, meaning that regardless of the very small environments you're already battling in, you don't really get any noticeable echo or reverb, and there are no actual environmental sounds to really speak of as well. Instead, it's a bit like the graphics. If someone's doing something, well, then it looks pretty okay, or it sounds pretty okay, but the moment that there's any downtime, the presentation can really drop. Overall, I'd say I'm sort of disappointed with some of the battle sounds here. Music. Now, this is easily the highlight. As a direct opposite of the sound, the music's engaging at almost all times, and though a bit heavy from moment to moment, there are a couple bits like a really cool super string and piano moment with low, almost discordant pianos matching the occasional key of a string instrument that really did add this somber feel to the game, and I love that. But just when you start to expect Optimus Prime to rip through one of the friggin' wine cellar's walls because the game's music is just starting to ramp up, it then can cool down and you're presented with some excellent wood and horn elements. I think it's pretty good, and it's eclectic, and in the end it actually does more for the entire category of audio than anything else. Voice. None, so let's move on. Gameplay. and of course, a bit about the story. So Zodiarc pretty much starts out with a group of folks trying to steal an artifact and then blossoms out from there. Now it's told in a wickerwork of pastels and smooth paintings, and then of course the game's in-game graphics itself, and you follow the lives of those affected by the items in the game world, and sometimes you split off and do side stories, or you stay with the main one. And let's be honest, this isn't Othello, it's not Pulp Fiction, hell, it's not even Way of the Gun. This is pretty much what you would expect from a middle schooler drama, and that really surprised me because the developers and a lot of other people have been talking about this deep, enriching story, and to be honest, the way it's played out, it's just not there. It's filled with odd chicken shit references and just horrible writing with some really off-the-wall emotional outbursts too, like that crazy person outside of McDonald's. You guys all know the ones I'm talking about. They ask for money and then you give it to them, and then they scream, "Do you think I need a handout, bitch?" and then run off with your dollar anyway. Yeah, that kind of stuff pretty much happens here. Luckily, for the most part, you're always jumping into a battle somewhere. Now, the game is turn-based with the typical atypical, everyone taking a turn on each side before switching to the other. That means every enemy takes their turn, and when done, every player takes theirs. When it's your turn and you're ready, you have a hand of cards that represent the character's abilities. Think of it like class skills that you just suddenly remember as you draw them out of your pocket. Magic for magic users, rangers for archers, and that kind of thing. You can have up to 7 that you can play, or you can choose to draw some new cards, hoping to fill out your hand if you've used them, or get better ones, or you can just guard, adding some generic buffs to your defenses, because you know what? It's typical logic in these games. The best defense is standing in the middle of the room yelling, "I'm not gonna move," but whatever. Now, when you play a card, a number of dice are given to you that you roll to impact changes on the card. They're connected, with the available dice going up in level as well as the skills themselves. Now, this part I actually loved. For example, a card might offer an extra 10 hit points of damage if you roll a star on a dice, and if you have those kind of dice equipped, you might be able to really hit above your weight, or for that fact, heal above your weight, which is vital in this game. After you roll, you can choose to roll 2 dice again, which can be a fantastic strategy since some dice might just have normal attacks or might also have attacks with huge additions like a +5. And in many ways, the cards are actually pretty unique themselves too, from leech spells to suck hit points from enemies to circus performing throwing knives, wicking out at ludicrous speed to kill people from afar. And I love some of the attention to detail here. For example, the leech spell. Think like that chair in the Dark Crystal that sucks Gelfling's energy out of it. That spell only steals what damage it can do to an enemy and heals you. So if the enemy has only 2 hit points, even if you do 20 hit points of damage, you only get the 2 healed before they die. And I like that. It stops the spell from being used on every character right as they die and keeps that power in check. And while I enjoyed the card and dice system, and I think there is some amazing strength there, the game has some issues. For example, strangely enough, there is no disadvantage to moving in or out of enemies' areas, meaning there isn't any threat, resulting in this hilarious loopingness where everyone's just running around the backs of everyone else for backstabs so they can't get counterattacked, or worst yet, splitting the scene with a single character to sprint past bad guys to the level's exit to then arbitrarily win the level in the scenario that allows that, but it doesn't really make sense in the story. Also, the game seems to hint that height will matter, but it doesn't, meaning you don't seem to get any bonuses if you're standing on a bunch of boxes higher than your enemies, and strangely enough, they don't have an issue either attacking you with a dagger even though you're 200 feet above them. Now, as you guys know, I test the difficulty in all these games, from those who are new to worlds moving in box measurements, all the way to those who like their tactics final. And the issue here, and the issue that's hampered the devs since prior to this release, is difficulty spikes. It's just rough difficulty spikes. They seem more in line with how the game is designed to flood you with a never-ending conga line of enemies, rather than any of them actually being intelligent, because they aren't. Because the number of times an enemy's retreated and then guarded when they barely had any cards and they need them the next turn, or they could have killed one of my characters and basically won that level, is countless. That doesn't mean they're pushovers, but usually the game hinges more on attacks with debilitating turn-by-turn damage like bleed than it does any kind of intelligent mini-maxing or even really understanding of what's going on in the game world. And in those levels where it just suddenly does get nut-crunchingly hard, many times it's those abilities of the enemies like that which turn the tide. Now, when you're not in combat, you get to jump into the team management system. Here you can see the stats of the characters in play, and they come and go depending on the story. So remember, this is one of the things that's important here. Some of the activities that you can do will pay off, but others may end up burning you, so pay attention. When you're between battles, you can do a couple things. First, you can make your deck of cards, which has to have at least 18 of them, and they're just with that character. Also, you want to check any special rules so that you can go into the other menu I'll talk about in a second and make sure that some dice correspond with those cards. Having a card that deals more healing on stars, for example, is useless if you haven't equipped any dice that actually has stars on it. In the next section, you can craft dice sides by destroying other dice. And basically that means if you have a good dice, but it's got a negative modifier on one side, you can change that by burning up other dice. But here's the problem there. Occasionally you're going to do that, and then because of the way the game tells the story, that guy that you just ended up burning some dice for to make a cool face is gone. And you're also out those dice for doing other things. And I did not like that shared resource. And in another section here, you can basically assign those different dice to the different slots, and those slots go up as you go up in level. Now, overall, I would say this. The game has a great deal of potential, but to me, it lacks a good deal of the tit for tat that I expect in games like this because of the many omissions and oddities that show why other titles in this genre have particular elements like height making a difference, threat making a difference, and of course, enemies really being intelligent or understanding of the battlefields. Fun factor. Despite what it may sound like, I did have a great deal of fun here for the first half of the game, but at a particular point later on, the game introduces what I can only describe as a grind battle arena that is every bit the proverbial requirement as it is playing any of the story missions. It's just so weird because honestly, grinding in this game and the lack of the ability to quick step through enemies' movements to sort of speed them along so you don't have to watch all their rolls, and the oddities in the design really hamper it later on. And just when you feel like you should be getting accustomed to things and things should be smoother, you realize that maybe you should not get accustomed to those particular things. I really do wish this had a couple more months to solidify the entire game and to bring a cohesiveness to the characters and the campaign narrative, and maybe elevate the atmosphere a little bit more to drive players into it and get some interest going. So as you guys know, I rate games on a buy, wait for sale, rent, or never touch it again rating scale, with rent being replaced by deep sale for PC titles. This is actually a wait for a sale. You know, it is only 20 bucks, but the fact is, if you are accustomed to any of these kind of games, it's just got a lot of roughness to it. So anyway, that's it for me. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. Maybe check out Twitter or Patreon. If you dislike the video, give it a thumbs down. Peace out and enjoy the rest of your week.